Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. Shall we see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhollow today? On a late recording today because we had a D&D session today, and you know, before the people of that D&D session get too excited, I'm not going to be spoiling things on that D&D session. Maybe there'll be some of my insights, I suppose, here and there for the first 5 minutes, of course, but then we'll have a conversation about. I don't really know. I haven't really thought about what a conversation is going to be about, to be perfectly honest. I've not really thought that far ahead. This is the moments where I just sort of like look at Arshas games, what's going on, anything interesting, multiverse, maybe not. Anyway, good evening everyone. Right now in Fawnhollow, it's 10:39 PM on Monday, March 11th, 2024. I think it was an interesting session we had today. It was a much more of like an investigative one. This, while the first one was more of an introduction to things, like here's like some of a plot, the second one feels like it's now starting to seep in the sort of seeds of, not seeds of doubt, but like the evidence which is happening, like actual questions are being asked and mysteries. If anything, from a DM perspective, I suppose, it's what I realise now is the most important part, is making sure that these characters are solid, that the plot lines are solid, and the minutiae of it can come, completely improvised. It doesn't really matter. Again, like a lot of the sort of minutiae was improvised. There were some things I certainly did plan for, mind you. Like, I guess to give you context, I knew what they... I mean, we're still in early stages, so it is like straightforward. What the players are going to do is going to become a lot harder to do things when they become a lot more unpredictable, when the scope of things become much larger. But I'll say, as it is right now, of course, I know what they can do. I knew they were going to try and investigate the person, and they were going to, well, investigate a person, and then they were probably eventually going to leave to fulfill his request and that sort of thing. So there's some things I did plan. I did plan what they were going to find, and I did plan exactly. I planned general ideas how they could find it. And if you are one of the players who are playing, you might ask, did you find everything? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, your investigation rolls were not quite high enough for some things to be found, which is a shame, because one of the things I will happily say, because I think it's like a cute little flavour thing, which doesn't have too much circumstance, but you would actually, maybe should I? No, maybe I'll eventually find out anyway. So, I'll hold out on that. There was something which was very sort of like a cute flavour thing, which unfortunately you didn't find. And the reason I'm saying this is because I don't think we're going to go back in again where they were trying to investigate. Well, maybe they will, I don't really know, to be honest. But maybe they can find out naturally. So I thought about what they could find, I thought about how they might find it, and then I sort of just like let it up to them. I think that's like the greatest thing, is basically you just give them a scenario, and then you just like, alright, solve it, and see what happens. Like there's one part where essentially they had to get through a door, but like the button to actually open the door essentially was like in a completely different room. What I thought they were going to do is I thought they would like try and jerry-rig some sort of system so that they can press a button and absolutely just sprint to try and get through the door. But then they very cleverly actually did something different. One of the players, they basically were like, can I jam it? Is basically like kind of like a trap. Can I use like my trap, my thieves kit to sort of like try and keep a button pressed down? Unfortunately, a bad roll meant that it didn't really get pressed down for too long, but I was like, that's actually a pretty cool idea. Like I straight up did not consider that in the slightest. But I mean, I think that's the part which I like about doing most, is like this sort of like improvisational thing. It's like I give a structure and I give it to them and being like, all right, now you give it back to me. And then part of my challenge is basically just trying to improvise with it and trying to figure out what's going on. There's certain things, of course, which are improvised, and I will give clarity of things which were improvised and which were not improvised. Meeting a character at a store was improvised, because I did not think, like, they asked basically what they were up to, and I just were like, oh, they're going grocery shopping or something, and then they were like, oh, let's try and meet them again, and I was like, okay, I didn't plan for this, but that's actually a really cool idea, so we'll go with it. Unfortunately, some not so fortunate roles as definitely cast perhaps a little bit suspicion of them. But I thought it was actually very creative, to be perfectly honest. No, not necessarily, maybe creative is the wrong word, but I thought it was like, oh, that's like a clever way to go about trying to investigate something. What else was improvised? I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. What did they do? They did that. But actually, to be honest, not as much of it was improvised in this thing, but I didn't have to actually prepare all that much for this session. I had to just like sort of think about what would happen, and then I prepared one battle map. in retrospect, I probably should have prepared some other things. I didn't. The library visit was again improvised because I did not think they would go back to the library. They went to the library for the first time, and I thought that was just going to be a one-off thing. So I was like, I won't bother making like a library scene or something. They went back again, and I was like, right, I still don't have a library. The bakery was improvised. That one I think is kind of obvious because I just sort of like dropped it randomly, and I was like, okay, I don't like have anything about this bakery. I don't even have like a shopkeeper or something. But I was like, it's not really very important because this is the thing, like, at least with a library, I can understand them going back to multiple times. The bakery they're not going to do much more except for pop in and buy some stuff. But these sort of flavour things are fun flavour things to actually fulfill, which means that now next time I know that they've done that, I think going forward, if I have like a time where it's like, oh, I don't have much to add, I don't have many things I need to work on to actually create, then I might as well just sort of like, I might as well like create like these extra scenes that they might visit. Like I might create like a generic bakery area or generic library, which I can bring up a scene, and then they can have like role play. Should they so choose? What's improvised? I don't know. But there was a decent amount of me just sort of sitting back and letting them decide like how they were going to do things themselves, which is, you know, honestly a delight, I think, from a DM perspective, because for one, it allows me to get a better insight, I suppose, of their own characters and how they see their own characters. And two, it means that hello tarantula, I'm not the one who's just continuously talking for like 3 hours straight. Which, as much as I certainly love to do that, as you can tell by my videos, I do love to talk. It's not really like it's a bit tiring, I think, doing it for 3 hours straight, like 3 hours straight improv. But it's cool, you know. But start, and it's interesting to hear their ideas. I'm not going to cast any light on whether I think their ideas are right or their ideas are wrong. But they are certainly more observant than perhaps I initially gave, not I initially gave credit for. But there's a lot of things that you read when you're DM, where it's like your players will feel like you might have the smartest friends ever, but as soon as they become players in a D&D campaign, they suddenly seem like they're the dumbest people ever or something, because it feels... I think it's by the nature of you creating a puzzle, obviously, or something like that. The puzzle is so clearly obvious to you, but when you're an actual player, it's a lot harder to sort of piece together. So, me, myself, I feel like I'm trying to err on the side, like, what I'm trying to do is, like, if I want something that they can actually work out, I want to err on the side of it being more obvious than it being too hidden, because I want them to discover it. Like, what's the point of making a secret if no one discovers it? There's no point of like me making a thing and then like 3 years down the line when the campaign's over being like, oh yeah, by the way, you know that character that you completely forgot out, he was actually kind of important because of XYZ. I mean, maybe that's interesting, certainly, but I feel like it's more naturally interesting when they can start to put together the signs pointing towards it, because you got to remember, as the DM, you're working with the full picture. They're working with a blank canvas, and they're only seeing the snippets that you give them. So it's a bit more difficult to put things together in that way. But I have faith in them. I actually think they are going to put together what's happening plot-wise. But they, of course, I'm drip feeding them things a bit and pieces at a time. But there's always cool to see. So yeah, I don't know. It was a fun session. I think they're all quite fun, to be perfectly honest. I think it was certainly a lot more low-key. There was some battles, but the battles weren't so very intense. They were kind of more nuisances, if anything. Okay, so what we can actually talk about today, I know I just spent like 8 minutes talking about D&D when I was like, I was only going to spend like 5 minutes. I'm just kind of, you know, I'm kind of interested in, you know, Genshin Impact patch is coming. It's coming out tomorrow. The thing I'm most split on right now is I don't know if I want to pull for Chiori or not, because now I know the next character is Allocation. Or Allocation, I don't remember how you say her name. And she is... I basically just want to know what her kit is like before I decide on whether I pull for Chiori or not, because I really liked Chiori when I first saw her in the story. Like, I loved her, like, very sort of sassy, curt personality. In fact, I still do, to be perfectly honest. But then, like, her kit came out, and I suppose to give you context behind the Genshin Impact kit, her mechanics are essentially very similar to another character, except for she just does more damage in certain teams, and in other teams she does... Well, she still kind of does more damage. She's basically... She's not quite a strict upgrade, but she is an upgrade, essentially, to this character. And I'm like, well, I've already got that character, you know, Albedo. If any of you actually play Genshin Impact, I have Albedo. I have a full mono Geo team. So I'm just like, okay, so... And I have a guarantee right now on the pick. So whichever next 5-star I pull on the character banner, I am guaranteed to get. So I'm just like, should I Should I pull for Jury? Or should I pull for Allocation? I don't know. Or like wait. But what I'm going to do is I'm probably just going to wait to see what Allocato's kit is going to be like and decide, hey, do I want to pull that or not? She's sounding like a Pyro DPS. I already have like tons of Pyro DPSs, so I'm just like, I don't know if I want another one necessarily. But if she's a fun playstyle, then I'll pull her. If she's not as cool, because I do actually quite like Joey's kit. Excuse me. I do like Jury's kit. It's just like, it's difficult for me to justify it in this game where you have limited resources to be like, yeah, I'm going to expend pulls on trying to get this character when I have another character who fulfills a very, very similar role for a team I don't even play all that often, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know. What I'm doing now is I'm spending the patch in the meanwhile, instead of doing artifact farming or something, I'm building the rest of my characters up to sort of get them all up to level 81 at minimum and talent level 9s where relevant. And you might be like, what does that mean? It's basically, instead of doing like this RNG thing to make my character stronger, I'm making the rest of my characters who I basically never use slightly stronger, like maxing them out to a certain degree. Because that's what I find most fun from like a sort of like collector fun standpoint. I just don't know, you know? It's a thing, because I love Joey's design, which is strange because when I first saw like her, I wasn't like particularly smitten or anything. I thought she was just like, oh, that's kind of cool, you know. But I loved her as a concept of like a fashion designer. It was like, well, my number one want from a character was be like, I want someone with a fashion designer, and I want them to have like fashion-esque things like fabrics floating around, replace sewing needles and thread. I think that'd be really cool. She doesn't quite have that sort of. She has kind of that. She like her burst, like she uses her two swords as like a pair of scissors essentially, and then she summons like mannequins, quote, which have like a sort of stitching attack. So I'm just like, this is kind of like exactly what I wanted. But I've got to sort of find a balance between mechanical fun and enjoyment of a character itself. Because while certainly I do enjoy her character, maybe it'll be more enlightened, I suppose, when I play the story quest or whatever comes with that version. It's another thing to be like, yeah, you know, I get this character, but I basically never use them. It's difficult to use in Genshin Impact, of course, because there's not really much late game content. So there's not much I need to use them for. In fact, like, I can use the same teams basically in every single Spiral Abyss and clear fine. Some of them I couldn't, especially since I didn't have C1 Dia for ages. It was pretty difficult to do C0 Dia for a lot of the content, but like, difficulty is of no concern. So it's really only these like random events here and there which I end up using them. It's difficult to say, you know. It's a split choice of like trying to decide if you like someone for mechanics or aesthetics, etc, etc. Of what exactly should you spend limited resources on. If anything, that's just kind of life, I suppose. You know, limited resources on what you have. You have limited time, you have limited money. You've got to decide where exactly your investment of each of these goes. And it's a really quite the hardest balance, I think, of life. If anything, I suppose I already made a big choice about it by doing this D&D campaign. I was like, I'm already going to expend a decent amount of my spare time into this. And then, like, not just for planning. Like, you might just mean, oh, because you have to do a lot of planning. Yeah, I do have to do a lot of planning, but you've got to remember that two of my evenings each week are also taken up by the actual D&D session itself, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. In fact, I find it super, super fun. To be perfectly honest, I'm surprised how fun I find it from the DM seat rather than like as a player. I know as a player I'd have an absolute ball doing it, but like I'm really enjoying, I suppose, being a storyteller at the same time. Despite the fact there's certainly more pressure because you're the one sort of like running the show, you're the one calling the shots, you had to make these decisions here and there, but I guess that kind of like suits me quite well, if anything. Yeah, so I forgot where I was going with this. Yeah, it's like it is a reasonable commitment, like, you know, Monday, Wednesday evenings done, and then like Tuesday, Sunday evenings are also kind of like busy as well because I had to spend time to actually do this sort of thing. I've got to actually start thinking about the Wednesday session as well because I'm going to be busy most of Tuesday evening, so it's going to be a little bit difficult. I do have a backlog though of videos, so, you know, I'm not too worried about that sort of thing yet. I need to start thinking about what that session's going to be like. I kind of know what that session's going to be like. I just don't know how it's going to fill up for 3 hours necessarily. But I think it's going to be a similar one to the session 2 I've had today, where it's basically like, okay, I've planted the seed, like I've introduced you to a plot of land in session 1 and session 0, and now we're going to start planting the seeds of what's happening. You know, we're going to start having a driving force. Like, to be fair, in their session 1, they had like a much more direct sort of driving force, where it's just like, well, we're kind of like under house arrest essentially. But it's interesting. It's interesting how things go. And I'm like, I simultaneously like want to know how things pan out. Like as a story, which is weird because I have like the general semblance of a story planned in my head, but I've got to sort of divorce it from the idea of like, this is how the story's going to plan out, because maybe my players make different decisions. Like maybe they come into evidence, or maybe they make a different conclusion, or come to a wrong conclusion, or a correct conclusion, as far as things go, or one that I didn't expect, and then, you know, the story will morph around it. So I try not to have too much of an idea of like, this is how I think things are going to plan. I mean, of course I think ahead and be like how I think things are going to pan out, but I'm not going to be like, yeah, this is how it will pan out, or anything like that. I've got to think, hold on, is Genshin Impact patching right now? Is it in maintenance? Hold on, let's see. Genshin maintenance, because I didn't use up my resin. March 12th. Okay, so it's tomorrow, is when the maintenance is. Okay, that's fine. I am busy tomorrow evening though. So I'm going to have to find some sort of time to actually make sure I save my resin or something. Interesting. Not sure really how that's going to pan out, but so be it. I don't know where I was going with this. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, split decision. Like, it's probably been a while since we had like a Genshin Impact sort of themed episode. But yeah, like allocating these limited resources. It's difficult. It's a difficult balance to get right. I guess kind of what I'm most surprised about is like how much of DMing, at least for me personally, the way I'm running it, is not so much like researching into these sort of things. Like, it's actually a lot less planning than I thought it would be. Like, I feel like I did most of the pre-planning, to be fair, beforehand, when I thought about like potential quest lines and plot lines and storylines and characters. So I guess I already did all the heavy lifting of the thinking. Now, like, the only thing I really the only thinking I really do is sort of like, okay, now I need to find like an enemy which is suitable for like this encounter we're about to have. I mean, like this time it was super easy. I was like, okay, I want to find something which is like kind of monstrous, and they're going to find it in a cave, and you know, it was reasonably easy for them to defeat. And I looked and I found, I can't even remember what it's called. It's like called I don't know. It's basically like, you'll know, I suppose, if you're playing D&D, it's like a squid thing which disguises itself as stalactites and jumps on people's heads. I was a little bit confused actually reading the monster, which I definitely should, like, I read it provisionally today, I suppose, before the actual session itself. But then, like, in the actual session itself, I was a little bit confused by it, because it was like, when it attacks, it's like, it attacks with this, and I just realised, I think I misunderstood it. I thought, like, it couldn't attack unless it, like, was attacking something which is medium or small and it had advantage on it. But now I just realised it can attack, and it's just a bonus on top that if it attacks something which is medium or small and it has advantage, then it can latch onto its head. But otherwise it can normally attack. Otherwise, like, I've just been playing them. I mean, to be fair, they would have been scared anyway, because one of the characters definitely, like, frightened them away both times, which was, I thought, pretty clever, to be honest. Nice outside the box thinking if you're one watching. I forgot what I was saying. I've just sort of realised that I misunderstood how the attack works. A little bit. Not too much. I don't think it really changes anything. Not really. Yeah, because I wanted to play them in the sort of like hit and run style anyway, where they're just sort of like a pestilence and a nuisance. And mission succeeded. But again, you know, back to the Genshin Impact thing at hand. I don't know if I want to pull Chiori or not. I still can't decide. I mean, I guess I will decide on Wednesday morning whether or not, because that's when her banner actually comes out. I'm tempted, but I'm not convinced, I suppose is what I'd say. You know, allocation of resources, always a difficult thing. Anyway, I'm going to round this episode off now and probably actually play some Genshin Impact. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.